Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Carlisle Cultcinema Club presents. And in this episode, I'm joined by Graham Humphreys in conversation. Graham is the legendary and iconic illustrator and designer for over 40 years. One of the few contemporary illustrators using the medium of gouache to paint his images. Graham is best known for his work within the horror genre, and to us VHS heads, he's best known for his poster and VHS designs for the likes of The Evil Dead and A Nightmare on Elm Street, and so many more. And these posters and covers adorn the walls and textbooks of our school books back in the day, because that's what you did. You didn't know these things were going to be so in need now. And we put them on textbooks and walls with bits of sellotape and all sorts over the years. But it's a pleasure to have Graham here. Welcome to the show, Graham.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you. It's a real honour because big fan of your work. And I think I've said the first work I ever remember of yours is the original Evil Dead poster and VHS box. As a young 9-year-old, my dad got it, and we sat down and watched The Evil Dead, and I was fascinated by the box. And then the film started, and God was I hooked, and that was it. Brilliant film. It's my fifth. It's joint favourite with Dawn of the Dead. So there we go. So I'll kick off the questions and ask. So why is it you chose to work with gouache paints?
First thing, you were 9 years old when you watched The Evil Dead.
Oh, yeah. Well, I watched 1983.
I was well, I in 1983 I was 23 years old, so making me feel old now. But anyway, the use of gouache is it's a very simple reason for that. It was the paint medium which we were recommended to use at art college. So 1976 I went to art college, and we had a list of things, requirements. So I did a 3-year course in graphic design, and there were various things which we had to ensure that we had at all times. A list of pencils, all these things, staples. The paint was always designer's gouache. Designer's gouache has always been the traditional paint of choice for graphic designers, advertising. Most of the last century, really. So when people used to paint ads for magazines and the like, gouache was always the traditional choice, because you could create flat colors, which would make very good backgrounds, and it dried very fast and was very versatile. So if you're meeting a deadline, gouache was the obvious choice. Oil paints, take ages to dry, weeks if not months. Acrylic largely wasn't in major use for the earlier part of the 20th century, and certainly all the various colors which have which you'd associate with most illustration work. Those colors weren't kind of widely available up until the sort of 60s and 70s. So gouache was just the traditional paint of choice for most people, and unless you're using airbrush work, in which case you might be using inks. But for me, beginning in my sort of graphic design training days, it's what I learned to use, and I found no reason to change it, really. It's just still very versatile, and over the years I've learned to use it in different kind of ways, and the surface you paint on and the brushes you use, how dry it is, how wet it is, all those things go into creating the work that I do now.
And it's always excellent when you post something up on Facebook. Your work, it's always absolutely superb. So you moved to London 1980. did you have any connections when you moved down, or did you just embrace that punk ethos and wing it and manage to get some work?
Um, well, I didn't really have connections in terms of work, but I had, there are three friends who'd moved up to London the year before. They were, senior to me just by that virtual 1 year, and they were already working in the business. They had to find their own way, of course, as well. So they had somewhere where I could actually stay. So I knew that I had somebody I knew and somewhere to stay, albeit on a floor. but but yeah, so that was the only connection as such, really from there, a sort of a base. Um, it was all about just making connections, which were phone calls, largely. In fact, only phone calls because there was no internet. No, that was the only way you got to find clients, because you could write, but I mean, who's going to write? You're just going to you go to the local phone box, which is literally what I had to do, and you know call people, because you would buy records, you would buy magazines, you would look at film posters, and you just look at the company details at the bottom or in the front pages or whatever. Sometimes there would be a phone number, sometimes not. So you'd be using yellow pages, directories, trying to find um, telephone numbers that you could call, and hopefully find the names of the people, the art directors, because literally that's the way everything worked. There would be an appointed art director who would be the person in charge of commissioning. This is less so now because over the years, as companies have been taken over and swallowed up, and budgets are being cut and workforces are being cut, the sort of hierarchy of command has been whittled away to the point where they cut out all the middle people, the art directors, the editors, etc. So it's a very, very different business to the way it was 44 years ago.
Oh, well, I can imagine it is, especially with the internet and AI on the upping as well, which can't be good. Now, I have heard that you owe your career to Joan Crawford.
Um, well, yeah, and then this is a weird thing because I did actually go into some of those details in the last book, which was, I did a chapter on the origins of the Evil Dead poster. Now, yes, it's very odd. I had seen Joan Crawford in a couple of films, Straight Jacket, Berserk, and What Happened to Baby Jane, and Trog, of course. And I just kind of thought that she was, one of these classic horror actresses, and I had no idea, she'd been a very hard-working actress. You'd gone through that whole process of being the romantic lead through to these later roles. So in my head, she was a horror actress, and I was looking for some sort of focus for sample work, which I could fill my folio with, hoping to generate interest with clients. And so I created a couple of pieces just using her as this kind of like, some iconic kind of figure. So these two particular pieces were the pieces that were seen by Palace Pictures, and it was those particular pieces which really led to the commitment to the Evil Dead. So that's the Joan Crawford connection.
Hey, that's fine. As long as it led you to the Evil Dead, is is just fantastic. So obviously that is how you kind of got working for Palace. And what was your first? Was it the Evil Dead you first designed for Palace?
That was the first commission, yes. In fact, it was their second theatrical film. They had released the French film Diva already, and so they picked up The Evil Dead at Cannes, and so they literally was their second theatrical release. I mean, Palace were already established with in the video market, as pioneers in the video market. So really, it was a natural move to go into theatrical distribution because quite often with video releases, one of the selling points was that it had been, a film had been theatrically released and had its profile already. That was the selling point. So the idea was you could actually release these films and then go straight to VHS immediately afterwards. Quite often there was there'd be like bidding wars over films because films would get released in the cinemas and there wouldn't necessarily be a video distribution deal attached. So one company might release a film at the cinema, and then another company would then take on the VHS role. And so there were fees, payable, and it really so it's a way of cutting out, all the extra red tape and costs involved. So you could release the film at the cinema, and then you'd own that film in order to release it on VHS as well. All those rights, have got quite messy over the decades, and in the same way that when vinyl kind of seemed to have vanished down a black hole, nobody was really looking at vinyl rights for music and soundtracks. So there were digital rights, which could be quite expensive, but nobody was really looking into vinyl distribution rights. So about 15, 20 years ago, you could pick up music rights for soundtrack work very, very cheaply. That of course has now changed again now that vinyls up on the up again. But yeah, it's all interesting stuff.
Definitely, yeah, vinyl's big style, and it's bounced back to the point that it's really brought buying physical music back into the zeitgeist, so to speak, because CDs have even started selling more as well. So it's been a good kind of thing for everybody. I don't think VHS will come back, mind you.
Well,
Um,
there have been recent attempts. In fact, you mentioned The Evil Dead 2 earlier on. The Evil Dead 2 has just had a sort of a limited VHS release by Vice. I mean, there's a limited number of units, maybe 350. I can't quite remember how many there were, but for collectors, I mean, there is a market there. But LPs, in the same way that Blu-rays are still selling. Obviously not in the quantities that VHS did in the early days of well, certainly throughout the 80s and even early 90s. But there was a market for physical media, and actually, of course, people have realised now that although it's great to be able to stream stuff, the fact is that stuff is disappearing. It will only appear for a certain amount of time, and once it's like going to the cinema. Once it's done its run, it's kind of that's it. Um, so streaming. I mean, I just I see myself on like some of the popular like Netflix and Prime. They'll tell you, these films are shortly to be unavailable on the platform. Well, who else is going to take them on? Maybe somebody will, but you cannot guarantee that these films are going to be available indefinitely. Unlike when you have your Blu-ray DVD, from the past, it's still there on the shelf. So there's the value in that. With vinyl, I mean, I still have the records I bought, when I was 16 and 17. They still play.
yeah, I've still got a lot of music that I bought back then, and yeah, all still plays beautifully. Um, but I'm a physical media collector, and I know what you're getting at. I still collect VHS, especially the presets, and Blu-rays and things. It's the boutique labels which I think are keeping it alive. the likes of your Arrow, your Film Treasures, your 88 films and things, and your Severin. They're the ones who are keeping the whole physical media alive.
Well,
That's my
they're doing a very good job of curating, because also what they're, mostly doing is looking to find the best possible material, source material, and where needed, restore it. Take it, bring it back to the standard that you'd want. Rather than the lazy thing that used to happen. You used to get a lot of the early DVDs and even Blu-rays would go to VHS as a source material or a laser disc, and you were not getting a new release. What you were getting was an old release, but just on a new format. So by going back to the source material and actually restoring it to the way it should have been seen, and bringing the sound quality up to scratch, it's all part of that curation. And people will inevitably have issue with the price point that it means. But then you're looking at the companies are not going to make a huge profit with the quantities. You're not going to be selling millions. So that's why you'll find there's a limited release on all of these things of thousands of units, because they know they can shift those, but you can't sell millions. So if it's a small market, what you want to ensure is that market is happy, because those 3,000 people are going to expect something good for that money. And so it does mean you're paying a little bit more.
very, very true. But very, very true. And we were talking about Palace. What was the favourite piece you did for Palace?
Well, I'm still very, very happy with the Evil Dead, because although I look at it now, and to me it's like looking at a child's painting in a way, because that's just over 40 years ago, and one would hope that I've kind of improved a little bit, but it has its little moment in my career, which is undeniably important in terms of the work it then brought afterwards. And also for somebody like yourself, you could talk about the Evil Dead, and it's a very important part of your life, those formative years, and to be part of that, to be part of that culture is a great unexpected honor, which would never been anticipated at the time. So yeah, that piece of work is very, very, very important for me, in terms of its career building importance. But the Freddy's Revenge, I'm still very, very happy with, because it's well, the portrait version, the original version of the poster, the quad was very much a sort of afterthought. But that particular piece of work, so the Evil Dead painting and Freddy's Revenge painting, those are two which I've retained, and will probably not sell, certainly in a foreseeable future, because they're pieces I'm very proud of, and value as part of my career trajectory.
I mean, the Freddy 2 artwork is superb. I mean, it is. I mean, it's as iconic as the Evil Dead artwork. That is.
I mean, yeah, in some ways, I'm sort of happier with that than I am with the original Nightmare on Elm Street poster, which I'm not embarrassed about at all. Obviously, when you look back at your work, especially very old work, of course, you can only really fault it, because that's what you kind of should do in a way.
Yeah.
You never rest on laurels as such. You always have to be self-critical, because you can't move forward and develop as an artist otherwise. But you can you can understand that why you did things at that particular time and see what worked and then build on those and then look at the things which you felt didn't work and then, move those to the side and think, well, okay, I had a go. That was an experiment, but not one to be repeated again. So you don't, if you sort of blow something up, you kind of don't repeat that experiment, do you?
You were saying about the work you're quite embarrassed with. What work are you embarrassed with? I couldn't think of,
Well, I'm not
you
going to
know.
tell you, Mike, because you go and look for it. And no, it's no, people do. I mean, there's a whole load of stuff out there which which resurfaces every now and again, and which stuff which I'm just not. It's just not good work, and it's not good work because I say that because I look at it now and think, it should have been better. It should have been better at the time, but it wasn't for two simple reasons. Number one, the deadline. Number two, the budget wasn't there to allow you to spend the time on it and actually earn money. You have to be quite brutal about this because it's ultimately it's how you live. If you're not earning the money, you can't live. So you have to that you can only spend a certain amount of time on something before you're actually paying for it yourself. And I didn't have the money to pay for my own work. The client's supposed to pay for it, not me.
How did you done that TV show? Oh God, many years ago now, where someone put money into you to do a. How did that pan out then? Because
Well,
obviously
that
when
was, yeah, so we're talking about 4 rooms.
that was it.
Yeah, 4 rooms, which in case anybody who's listening is unsure what that is, it's a program where people would bring in objects which had some sort of perceived value or not. And the idea was you would pitch it to 4 different people, hence the 4 rooms in 4 different themed rooms, on the hope that they would make an offer and buy whatever it was, and you'd walk away with the sale, and they have what they bought from you, and then be selling it on essentially, because they're all dealers. At the end of the day, nobody's collecting for themselves; they're all just looking to buy something which they know they can then sell on for a profit. So well, it was suggested I might go onto the program, really not with the artwork in mind, but with bizarrely some item of taxidermy. Can you believe? So it was just it came through a friend of a friend, and they'd suggested that I had an odd collection of things that perhaps some of those objects might look quite good on the program. They were looking for unusual things, stuff that to make the program look interesting. I thought, well, I didn't have anything that was really genuinely valuable, other than some pieces of artwork, and I thought, well, if I took on a couple of pieces of work, I could probably make the money to pay for a book. I wanted to release a book of the work, just as a sort of an archival thing, really, just in case artwork got damaged or the place burnt down. There would be some record of stuff other than the old posters, and maybe people had some transparency of files somewhere. But anyway, I thought a book would be a good way of just pumping the stuff out there and creating an archive. And then the other thing was to exhibit the work as well, because a lot of people hadn't seen. I knew that people were interested in the artwork, but most people hadn't seen the original painting. So I thought to actually have an exhibition where people could actually view that original Evil Dead poster and Nightmare on Elm Street work. I thought it would be something just to support the book launch as well. As it happened, one of the dealers had his own publishing company and owned a gallery, so but we just worked out for a nominal fee. I can tell you what it was, £1,000, which I sent to Parkinson's UK because my father had recently passed away from Parkinson's related illnesses. And I just wanted to, it just seemed a good thing to do is that, I wasn't doing it for the money. I wanted to do it to get a book out there and get an exhibition up and running. So the money wasn't that important. It was just a means to an end. So anyway, those ends were a book and an exhibition, which actually did happen. I'm very glad to say, and uh, not entirely with the end result that I'd wished for, because the gallery owner had also decided that he wanted to do a sort of a luxury product. Now, for me, that was ridiculous because the horror world is not awash with cash. Most horror fans are not rich people. It's different in science fiction because science fiction does actually attract the people with money, and there just seems to be more. It seems to be more respectable in a way. Horror is always considered not respectable. Anyway, when you price a book at £125, that's just really going to not sell, as simple as that. And I was slightly disappointed that was the route they chose to go. Fortunately, moving on 4 years beyond that, then I had another chance to release a book, which priced at £25 was far more reasonable. And subsequently a follow-up book as well, 4 years after that one. So the work is out there in a more affordable fashion. The other thing I had to do was ensure that, as a stipulation of that publishing deal, that all the work was printed with permission from the various clients and license owners, which meant with the Evil Dead going to Sam Raimi, for instance, who was the license owner for the original Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. With Nightmare on Elm Street, that meant going to Warner Brothers, who owned the franchise. Now, it's one of those mysterious things that I can say that I own a painting, it's my artwork, therefore it's my copyright. Well, it isn't, because what you're representing is covered by license and copyright within the film. So when you represent the character Freddy Krueger, that is Freddy Krueger. That's a licensed character, and the likeness of the actor and the makeup, is all subject to license and copyright as well. With the Evil Dead, obviously, even the title, that's all in ownership. The images of Bruce Campbell, the actress, all those elements are all owned. They're licensed and copyrighted. So whilst I might own the painting, I can't actually own the license, if you like, for the images therein. So it all gets very, very complex. Warner Brothers sent me this massive document. I mean, it's like a wodge document by courier from the States, which I had to sign, and it has that clause, which all these American companies like to do, just to cover themselves completely legally, is you have to sign off the ownership to the company, which literally says throughout the universe in perpetuity. So it's like forever and ever, on Mars, on planet Venus, wherever it may be. That's literally just saying you no longer have any right to this. They own it, and they alone. No matter what species you might be in what other cosmos. Yeah, incredible, really. But it's all about protecting the rights and who makes money out of it. So at the end of the day, I can put the image in a book, and literally, I'm not robbing them at all. It's all about protection. If it's Star Wars, James Bond, the Marvel universe, whatever, it's understandable. All this stuff makes lots of money. Harry Potter, all these franchises make lots of money, and continue to do so. Just they sell licenses, so you can have licensed products. If it's something from about 40 years ago, and it's just my particular painting, it's not really, I'm not robbing them at all.
No, definitely not.
Tell that to the lawyers.
That is mental. But I can remember sitting down because we used to watch forums, and you popped on. I was like, Graham Humphreys.
Yeah, what's he
Like,
doing on here?
uh,
Screen.
just like, what's he doing on here? And then obviously you done the thing, and it was just like, this is brilliant. And I did have it on my Skybox for, oh God, until the Skybox kabutted. I kept that episode just because you were on it. And I was obviously a big Evil Dead fan. Um, was there any projects that you ever did that never got released and somebody else ended up releasing it and you were a bit gutted by?
Um, I can't think of anything that would have any regrets attached to it. I mean, there have been a very occasionally, it's a very rare thing where you complete a job and for whatever reason it's not used. It has happened just once or twice, but nothing where I really felt, it was uh it was something that I felt bad about, in terms of I really wish that it had gone out there. I mean, you know what I did a soundtrack cover for Death Waltz recording company. I mean, I did their first soundtrack issue, which was Zombie Flesh Eaters, and I think the second one for maybe the second one I did for them, I'm not too sure, was The Devil Rides Out, um, under license from Hammer. It never got released for whatever reason. So I did the artwork, and it's I've actually sold on the painting actually at some point later, but it never saw the light of day. And actually, if it ever if it did now, I'd be embarrassed because I'd like to think that the work I would do now would be an improvement on what I did then. But at the time, I was a bit disappointed that it never got its official release.
Oh,
And I didn't get paid either.
that's bad as well. You've done all that work and didn't get paid. Um, so have you got any more books planned? Because you've got obviously the excellent Nightmares on One Sheet and Hung, Drawn and Executed. Anything else planned coming out?
Well, with the second book there, A Nightmare on One Sheet, it seemed um, it was appropriate to release it because I literally had a new body of work which matched the quantity of hung, drawn, executed. So it's all new work, with the exception of the chapter I did about the Evil Dead, and I think I might have had something else in there, which was a reference to to previous stuff. But largely it was all new work, and the idea is that if there's enough new stuff for a further book, then it makes perfect sense to go ahead with a third volume in that series. So I'd say at this moment in time, there's certainly half a book, probably on the way to, by the end of next year, there will be enough for a new book.
Oh,
Um,
good.
and also, hopefully the work will be another step up from the previous book as well. There's a lot of stuff that, I mean, there's probably at least 20 pieces that could have gone into the previous book, but simply weren't actually at the point of being officially announced, and therefore could not be seen because it was still confidential work. And so those will certainly go into a new book. And yeah, there's been a lot of work since that last publication. Perhaps I could fill a new book already, but I want to just have the option to filter out stuff which I think is probably not as strong as some pieces. And certainly, I've got a lot of projects ahead already, which I know I would love to get in there simply because they're interesting titles, and I know that the work will be good as well, or as good as it can be at this stage.
That's brilliant. So, folks, you heard it here. There will be a third book. Graham's nearly got enough work.
Fingers crossed, yeah. No, I've got to think of a clever title though.
Well, that's it. Another great pun.
Yes.
Um,
I was pipped with the last title because I was going to call it the Coffin Table book, play on coffee table, obviously. But Butch Patrick, who played Eddie Munster, released a book called the Coffin Table book before I could. So that wasn't an option.
that's bad timing. Um, so, what was it like when you had to move from obviously doing illustrations to them horrible Photoshop years?
Well, I didn't. To me, it wasn't a major issue.
Illustrate.
I mean, yeah. I mean, thing is, you take work where you can, and you know, um, taste change. The market changes. Of course, it does, though. So there already had been a move away from illustrated posters. I mean, Photoshop, desktop publishing created an opportunity to make, well, in theory, to make posters cheaper. Now, I know for a fact that actually didn't happen because all it did actually posters more expensive to produce, believe it or not, because when you're paying for somebody's time to composite a whole bunch of images in Photoshop and do all the cleaning up of, transparencies and retouch, it takes time, if it took me 3 days to paint something for a poster, it could easily take that, if not more, for somebody to photocomp a poster. And especially when you're paying for studio time as well. And also the other thing is the room for indulging oneself, shall we say, in Photoshop. I mean, people, I watched people, I worked in a studio where people were doing this. They were literally just spending hours and hours over something with no appreciable difference to the eye, And the other thing is working with very high resolution files to deliver high resolution images as required by the distribution companies, because obviously they're thinking these will go onto billboards, large format posters. Therefore, we have to have these massive files. Well, the thing is, when I would paint something, that is as good as ever going to get. You can scan it, to the nth degree, but that piece of paint on the paper is not going to look any better, with a higher resolution. It's literally, that is what you get. And it's the same with images, photographic images. You can carry on blowing them up, and ultimately, of course, they break up. That's the nature of things. The files, if it's pixels or grain or whatever it is, you can only go so far with it. The thing is, the printing processes which create those billboards. If you've ever gone up to any billboard, even on the underground, if you look at the large format posters, you go up to them very close. You're just seeing grain and digital artifacts. You're not seeing more detail. So the obsession with detail always used to sort of just make me laugh, really, though, because it's just pointless. And so with Photoshop, especially in the early days, all those larger files would take ages to process. It was actually painful. I mean, there were times literally where you'd leave something to process overnight. That's because the technology hadn't quite caught up with the requirements of the distributors. But this is all kind of by the way now, really. I guess the idea was that photoshopped images were a novelty, as simple as that. And for most people, seeing a photoshopped image was exciting and new. And we know now, of course, it's everybody's seen everything you can do with Photoshop. It's not new, and it's kind of old in a way. And actually, what is new for a lot of people is seeing painted work, okay, which is just bizarre, isn't it? Though? But that's these things come in cycles. I'm sure illustration will fall out of favor, but I guess for a lot of people, there is a nostalgic side to painted images, and that's not necessarily going back to the 80s. It's going back to the 30s, 40s, to the 19th century. Posters from the 19th century. So there's a sort of value in those hand rendered images, which still has an appeal now, and it may be that it doesn't mean those images are being used on mainstream posters, but it means there's a place for them somewhere else. And with as you'll be aware, alternative movie posters have become a very a very collectible item over the last sort of 10 years, if not longer, because they're just new expressions of campaigns that have existed and been seen over and over again. People are looking for new ways to revisit older favorite films. So if you can take a film and find a new angle on it and create a poster which actually um, appreciates and respects that original property with new fresh eyes, then that's quite exciting for people. You can look at something like The Thing, The Exorcist, one of these films which has been revisited over and over again, and if you can find something new there, a new way of making it exciting again, not only does it create a piece of artwork which hopefully expresses the enthusiasm and interests and artistic values, it also might make you go back to the film and actually see it in a new light. I mean, certainly for me, going to revisit these films for alternative movie posters has made me see those films in a new kind of way. And actually, I'm enjoying them for different reasons than the reasons I originally did. So for me, it's an exciting way of um, kind of perpetuating the legacy of cinema, if you like. Just it's there's always new ways of seeing things because you can see things through the lens of contemporary culture and contemporary politics as well, and so all these things take on a new life.
Yeah, yeah, you very, very true there. Um, I mean, out of all the artwork you've done for film and non-film, what's been your personal favorite piece?
Um, well, you're putting me on the spot there because I can't choose a particular piece. I mean, there are pieces I've been very happy with, and in fact, there are pieces which I can't show you right now because they're still confidential. The stuff I did 2 years ago, which is still yet to see the light of day. Um, I'm told these things might be, might appear within the next sort of 6 months or so. Stuff gets kind of put on the shelf for a while. Um, for whatever reason. But yeah, there is some soundtrack work, cover work I've done, within the last couple of years. I'm particularly happy with, which is yet to be seen. A couple of alternative movie posters, which I've painted in the last 6 months, which have yet to be seen as well. I'm particularly happy with. But I was very happy with the reworking I did of Dawn of the Dead. I think that kind of worked very well. I mean, for me to feel that I've actually achieved a piece of work which I can be satisfied with. Um, of course, in 2 years' time, I'll look at it and think, "God, that's a bit rubbish." But for now, there are pieces which I'm content with, shall we say? And I think Dawn of the Dead, I think I was very happy with. The Thing, I was happy with, and a couple of new pieces I feel have achieved what I wanted to achieve in terms of level of satisfaction and feeling that I've actually um, met the brief and actually gone beyond the brief as well.
No, I mean that Dawn of the Dead piece is beautiful. I must admit, I know the piece you're talking about, and it is a cracking piece. Um, I mean, Dawn of the Dead's such a great film. I'm sure I'm screening it for my birthday in a couple of weeks, as well. So it's always a winner for me. And I've got to ask you about the Gentleman of Horror.
Go on
Well,
then.
tell me about the Gentleman of Horror. Who's in it and who's involved? from your point of view. I've had Alan's point of view. I want your point of view now.
Well, let me just say, first of all, there is no Gentleman of Horror as such. There is no secret society, no kind of club, no membership, nothing at all. It's just a joke name, which a group of people just gave themselves simply because um, I mean, I'm not even a sort of somebody who was there to start with, though. There were about three or four people who used to meet just as mates on a regular basis, and that's still the case now, really. And it's just that it just became a funny little thing because, well, Alan Bryce, of course, is involved with Dark Side magazine and now Dark Fest, of course. Eric McNaughton, is has been the face of We Belong Dead. And Kevin, who does all the design work for We Belong Dead and other publication Dark Side as well, is also by default a gentleman of horror. Emma Dark, the term gentleman is just a sort of a loose, because it's like the League of Gentlemen, it's one of those names which kind of just it is a parody of something in a way. And we're not gentlemen by any means. But Peter Fuller, who of course works with the Vincent Price Legacy, and of course is a huge horror fan and a writer and is himself and does reviews. For myself, obviously, it's my field, horror. So Dave Swift, musician, very good musician, works with the Jules Holland Band, or plays for the Jules Holland Band, is a huge Boris Karloff fan, obsessively so, and thus makes him a gentleman of horror. So just because, is it convenient every sort of 2 months or so, every month and a half, if we're all round at the same time, we can meet up and discuss horror films, and mostly classic horror, of course, so because we're of an age and thus gentlemen. we're not the kids of horror. Let's put it that way. So that's really it. And for various reasons, Dave Swift generally is on tour, and hardly able to come along. Emma tends to be busy herself, and we'll get busy and can't always meet up. But when there's three or four of us, occasionally it's just been two of us, even though it becomes a meeting of the Gentlemen of Horror, and it's just a joke name that's applied. And as I say, there's no membership. It's like basically if you've got a bunch of friends that you like to meet on a regular basis, might be you might be going to pub quizzes with three or four of your mates. That's all it is. And I don't know. Some people sort of seem to think that, well, how do we become a member? How can we come along and join up? Well, I wouldn't ever look at somebody in a pub who's there with a bunch of mates doing a quiz or whatever and say, how do I get to join your group? Because that's just insane. So anyway, so that's the Gentleman of Horror. There is no Gentleman of Horror.
The thing about the Gentleman of Horror, there is no Gentleman of Horror. I like that. So what have you got coming out that you can tell us about artwork wise?
Well, there are a number of Blu-ray releases coming up. I've been working a lot with Second Sight, 88 Films, and I'm just doing something for Eureka at the moment. But there is the first of the official Hammer reissues under the new stewardship of John Gore. That's going to be, I think, probably out at Halloween, and certainly that will be a sort of a special screening at Darkfest with Hammer introducing the film on screen. So I'm not too sure at what point that will be a public thing. I can't officially give you the title. It's not one of the original Camera classics from the
I know the title, and I just want secrecy.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, anyway, it all will be revealed shortly, and hopefully I will be doing some more work with Hammer, because we'll see. I'm a big Hammer fan. You'd never guess by looking at some of the posters behind me. But and of course, with Waxwork Records, there have been a couple of Hammer soundtracks as well, which I've worked on, which again haven't seen the light of day yet, but hopefully those will be forthcoming. So two great Hammer titles. So I think hopefully there'll be more to come there. It's stuff I can actually talk about. I don't know actually. As I say, everything I do is kind of confidential until it's really out there. So unless it's out there and you know about it already, I probably can't say anything really. But I will say there's a lot of work ahead, and I'm doing a lot of work at the moment as well. And one of the odd things I've been doing is working with Dacre Stoker, the great grandnephew of Bram Stoker, who was involved with his putting his name to Stoker Wines, which is there's a vineyard which is being bought. There's a winery which is already bottling stuff. So I've been designing the wine labels for Stoker Wines, obviously all Dracula themed. Now, here's another thing about licensing and copyright. Although Dacre Stoker is obviously, the living descendant of Bram Stoker, and in theory, there is some ownership there. A lot of these associated names and iconography with Dracula has been copyrighted and licensed by. This is the way the business works. You get somebody, here we go, in the States, who decides they're going to copyright or buy the copyright or license all these things. So they license the name Dracula, they license the image of Dracula, they license Bride to Dracula. All these things to do with Dracula kind of are all suddenly under license. You have to buy the license from this kind of legal person in order to actually do anything with Dracula and anything associated with Dracula. It's all very absurd and very silly. So you have to work around what you can actually do, what you can't do before being sued or having to spend the money on a license. So all these things, everything's about licensing and copyright. It's all really infuriating, but that's just the way of the world, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's madness. That you would think Dracula's relative would be able to use Dracula no problem at all, but yeah, Universal have probably got rights to the name somewhere along the line, because of their connection with Dracula. They'll have some, finger in a pie somewhere along it. I'm thinking, but yeah, that's crazy. That.
Well, certainly the ownership of Christopher Lee's performance of Dracula, and according to which version, which film as well. So his image is licensed, but then if one company has the license for, say, let's just say offhand, Dracula Prince of Darkness, that is one image of Christopher Lee's interpretation of Dracula, but then perhaps Dracula's Risen to the Grave might be images from that film might be owned by somebody else, and it's to do with the change of costume, the actual look, the physical look, which could be something as simple as how the hair is. That version of Dracula is suddenly under license to somebody else, and another version is under license to somebody else. So it is a complete minefield.
Yeah, I can imagine it is, to be honest. God knows what they had to do, hoops they had to do for Neckett to get the rights to do a figure, which is coming out soon, which looks great, with the Van Helsing figure as well.
Well, I'm going to presume those are licensed, but again, you'll find that those are specific looks and costumes to a particular title. So yes, they will have gone through that due diligence, one presumes. I don't think these are unlicensed items, But I mean, I did years ago work on a box for a licensed Christopher Lee Dracula doll, a 12-inch doll, and that proved to be a complete nightmare because although the rights were in theory granted by Hammer as they existed at the time, when I think it was a part owned by Saatchi, and they were looking to explore ways of capitalizing on the Hammer legacy. They were very happy to offer a license for a Dracula doll, but it was specifically the Dracula that appears in Dracula Prince of Darkness. All those details had to be observed. Anything which deviated from that would no longer be under the license. And so my friend, a friend of mine who actually created that doll, he had a sculptor create the likeness and somebody else kind of, craft the costume and accessories. Before it went to market as such, he introduced it at a toy fair up in Birmingham, XL, and some photographs appeared on the internet, and literally within 24 hours, who should be on the phone but Christopher Lee, to my friend, threatening to sue him. And my friend was trying to explain, well, this is licensed, it is official, and obviously nobody thought to tell Christopher Lee. So anyway, there was I think it kind of ended not amicably, but it did end legally, that Christopher Lee kind of had to just allow this product to go out there grudgingly, but he refused to do anything to promote it or and it was planned there would be obviously a Brown Frankenstein and possibly a Gorgon, the reptile, Plague of the Zombies, all these things were planned, but of course, it really, the product never sold as well as it had been anticipated, and with all the legal nonsense going on, I think it was just dead in the water really though. So it seems other companies have been able to navigate these very murky waters and bring stuff to market. But these things are it's very difficult. The licensing is an absolute bloody nightmare.
Yeah, I could imagine. I'm pleased I don't have to do any of that malarkey.
Don't mind.
When I first started the screenings, there was trying to get licensing and stuff like that was a bit of a nightmare, but we've kind of got all that sorted now, so we just screen what we need to screen now, which is great. Which I've got Dawn of the Dead next week, and then The Evil Dead's the end of the month.
Fantastic.
For Halloween. I was thinking of something I wanted to screen, and I'm thinking, what kind of screen? I need something proper iconic. And The Evil Dead was the first film we screened back in 2017. So I thought, do you know something? It's my 50th. My two favourite films, Dawn of the Dead and The Evil Dead. So I'm screening Dawn of the Dead for my birthday on the 12th. I'm going to screen The Evil Dead on the 26th.
And of course, the terrifying thing is, when you think about it, 1983, when The Evil Dead came out, it was made in 81, I believe. At that time, we'd be discussing screening, probably Bela Lugosi's Dracula or The Bride of Frankenstein, because that's the kind of period of time we're talking about. We're talking about a 40-year period. So in the very early 80s, we'd be looking at stuff, kind of literally from the sort of 30s and 40s.
Yeah, I was quite lucky because obviously being born in the 70s, I got the BBC Two double bills and the BBC double bills, the horror ones, with all the old classics, both Universal and Hammer. So I felt lucky that I kind of got brought up watching those. Then I was there at the early days of VHS as well, getting to watch the video nasties as well at a too young an age, but it didn't turn us into a psycho.
Well, you say that.
A lot of people would differ. But no, my dad was a big film fan and we had no censorship. So I was watching Cannibal Holocaust and The Evil Dead and Cannibal Ferox and Zombie Flesh Eaters and all these wonderful films. Really, I was way too young, but it was the 80s.
And turned out to be gentlemen of horror.
That's it. This is it. But I think I've kind of covered everything I wanted to ask. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you here, Graham.
If I apologise, I probably gave you some very long answers.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's the answers you gave were fantastic, and I'm sure people will enjoy hearing them. And again, thank you so much for being on. I'll do an outro, and if you stick around after the outro, we'll have a quick natter. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. This will probably go out next week. Alan Bryce's is going out tonight. When I finish this, I'll be putting it up. And yeah, you're next week.
His will be better. He's got better stories.
With Alan's is about an hour and 40 minutes. We've got, and his
you managed to keep him down to that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he was going out. So that's the only reason it was that short. But well, the actual interview is about 2 hours, and I've chopped about 20 minutes out from the start and the finish, where we were chatting before the interview and chatting before and after, because he's an absolute star, and he's second time on the show, and he enjoys doing it. He says so. I'm happy with that. But no, I will say good night and God bless. So thank you for being here, Graham. You absolutely legend of a man. You are superb. For me, the best poster artist out there, just because I love your posters, and I still have them up in the cinema room, and you know, there's still Evil Dead stuff not dotted around this room here and things. So you know, you were part of that love of that film for me, because I do adore that artwork. So thank you for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Good night and God bless everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode.